We're recording, I assume?
10 minutes today.
Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's information session. Before we start, a reminder, this workshop is live streamed. However, while the workshop is open to the public, it is for staff to provide guidance to elected members. It is not a forum for debate or decisions. It is also not a forum for the public to provide input into decisions or bring other matters to the attention of council. If a member of the public does want to provide input, please talk to staff and they can help you have your say. So we are not item number 5, Capital Endowment Fund for the Youth Hub Trust. We've got Josh here. On you there. To talk to us all about it. Thank you very much.
Tēnā koutou, councillors, and thanks for allowing us to have this information session. For us, this is an opportunity to discuss with you the Capital Endowment Fund application from the Youth Hub Trust, which is towards their event space as part of the Youth Hub development. We've attached all the relevant information that will again be in the council decision coming to you on the 18th of September. Just noting in between now and then, we also have a visit to the Rata Foundation, who we've had some conversations with about this application, and we work in partnership with them on things like this. And then also, I guess just noting, which is also in your attachments, that there is budget available in the Capital Endowment Fund for this purpose. And really how this came about is that the Youth Hub Trust presented to the long-term plan. Obviously, finances were very, very tight at the time, and the recommendation from council was that they come through the capital endowment as a vehicle for funding that's already provided for within rates. So very happy to take any questions. Danielle, she's the Community Development Advisor for Youth, so has that particular portfolio, and myself from the funding side of things.
Okay, thank you. Tim, please.
I may as well start because I'm not really in favour of it, because I think it should actually go to Rata, should be paying the whole lot. But a couple of questions, just so I know fully informed. With regards to funding of staff, are they going to be coming back to us in 3 years when the funding for the site the venue manager, etc., and the funding manager and all that runs out, or have they got ongoing funding secured past the 3 year?
This application is
you may not be able to answer it today, but it would be one of those when it comes to us finally. I
think we will definitely field applications from the groups that are tenanted as part of the broader Youth Hub space. My understanding is that there's budget that has been put aside for operational costs from the Youth Hub Trust, and really this is just focusing on the capital project.
And the concern with regards to the residents in the area, we've had ongoing issues with other parts of Christchurch, but they're more industrial, yet we've had, because of the infill in the central city, we've had issues with sound, etc., sound noise levels.
Yep.
We're paying now. Obviously, there's probably favourite numbers around the table, but we're actually paying to build a black box in a residential area. What are the protections that are going to be required? Are we putting any in? Because this is all going to come back to council, our noise control, our staffing time, etc., if there are issues there. So I'm just wondering, if we're going to fund something, are there going to be requirements for sound protection, etc.?
Yeah, and that was one of my questions, because I remember I think it was the resource consenting discussions around this. So yes, we visited the site and talked through a lot of that. There are provisions for the number of events over a certain capacity per year. There's provisions for privacy plantings for the neighbours, even down to the types of murals that are put on, are done in consultation with the neighbours and the surrounds. So I think we can say they've been very considerate for the surrounds, and that did come through council's guidance at the time of doing the consenting process for this project.
And as my last question, as you've been talking with Rata, I mean, this does tick all their boxes, and it's not saying this is not a fantastic initiative. That's not the question, or the concern I have. The concern I have, we've just done our funding rounds. We have a whole lot of organisations that didn't get what they want and don't have, or some didn't get funded at all. So we are continually the last cap of the block, but this obviously fits into the now restricted and self-limited funding of RATA. So if we allowed them to fund the whole thing, that would give us extra money to fund others that fall outside of their self-appointed limit. Is that correct? That would be correct.
Yeah, this application fits within our capital endowment fund criteria.
Yeah.
I can't speak on their behalf. They have their own trust board. I don't believe that RATA would fund the entirety of this project, and that it would leave the trust in a situation where they'd need to find money from RATA plus somewhere else.
But I guess if you're looking at an organisation that is able to bring philanthropic, I mean, they've got a fantastic list here of a lot of funders which they've brought in. I'd say they'd be better, they would be more geared up and more successful with philanthropic and other areas than many of the others that we've turned down and that at RATA haven't looked at or won't look at. Would that be a fair statement? I mean, it's obvious that they're very good at philanthropic. There's no
They have a
question
very
about that.
good
It's in black and white.
reputation.
Yeah, so they are geared up for it and they are far better at it than many others. And that's absolutely a compliment to them. But we have others that aren't.
Yeah, I think it's important, because we're in a workshop, I'll be blunt. I think it's important that you remember the conversations that some of you have had around the table with this organisation. And although you don't make promises, there has been some conversations requesting applications come in. So that's what the staff have done. They've accepted this application. The RATA thing, I think that's a conversation you need to have with their governance when you meet. But it would be totally unrealistic for us to expect RATA to fund the whole lot. It's a multi-million dollar project. And although it fits within what they're aiming to be, I think for us as having an investment in youth, and I know it's not our money, it's council's money, this is a good project for what we've been looking for a long time in the city.
I'm not questioning the value of it. Is it. And look, Josh and Danielle, thank you very much for the information. It's been really, really good. I just have a concern. We've got so much need. We've recognised there's a crisis for funding out there, and I'm just looking at, how do you cut across?
Sure.
That's my lot. Thank you.
It would leave a little over 1.4 million in the capital endowment for this financial year. Bearing in mind that tomorrow we have 2 applications coming to you for about 140,000 together.
And the funding that we've just done the other day, I think it was just over 100 didn't get funding. So there's a big need out there, and I'm just wondering how to, for want of a better term, skin the cat.
Sure.
Thank you. Pauline, please.
Thank you. My computer's just decided to restart right now. How many stages are there? They've done stage 1.
Yep.
This is stage 2.
Yeah, and this is where some of the complexity comes in because of, and forgive my technical ineptitude on this, because of ground floor fire sprinkler systems. Actually, by completing the event space, which is considered stage 2, it actually allows them to access a lot more of the already built second floor floor area that was created as part of stage 1. So from this, you get an event space, but you actually also activate a whole lot of the space that has already been built in stage 1. To answer the question directly, currently planned for 2 stages. There's a 3rd stage potentially, which could be social housing or some kind of housing provision on the remaining land of the site. But that's down the track, and really finishing this is their priority for now.
So the spaces that can be activated as a result of this, will they be the ones that could bring income from rentals?
Yes, it would be essentially tenanted or hot desked by youth organisations.
So, and what's the timing for this stage to be completed? Pending
Stage
funding?
1 or 2,
This one, that the application.
the event space.
Yeah.
Starting early next year, finish mid next year. So it's relatively.
Okay, and so because the total cost of this section is 2.4 million, so they're seeking 100% of that cost.
From us.
Yeah, no, from us and Rata. So my question is, like, you've listed all these other potential funders, but where are they? Or are they just interested in OPEX later, but not the capital funding?
I think we've listed funders confirmed.
I can't see it.
Yeah, and actually,
130, isn't there, the additional coming in? But this project says total cost 2.4. Us, we're just under
it
2,
would be
and Rata is 500.
it'd be us and Rata. Some of the other funders have helped to contribute towards the design costs,
Yeah,
some operational costs. This is for the build, the capital works.
But are there other funders?
Yeah, and
Two big ones. which
and I
is
think
Rata and us?
since we've written the report, potentially there's one or two other funders that have come on board as well. There's definitely there is support for this project. Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's support, and I know it's real hard times for raising money. But my question is, the council putting in 2 million is a big chunk. Is there no other partner that might, like, if we were to put in less, like 1, would that encourage another funder to come in, or another couple to come in with a couple of 500s? Do you think, or is that?
It's hard to say what other funders would do.
What about if we were to fund? Because I know this is over 2 years, 1 million for 1 year, and see what happens. They can come back again the following.
You have the ability to make that decision.
So, did you want to give them surety of the money?
Well, for us, we want to see the project come through to completion. The risk is that if you give less, then that potentially they're stuck in a situation where they need to go and find other funders to make up that difference. But I understand where you're getting.
It's a chicken and an egg, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because if we give it all, why should anybody else come in? If we seed it, then there might be others. But they probably need that surety to get the pipeline of work going, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And recognising that a lot of funders came in for the first stage, which was significantly bigger price-wise. I think it was in the $16 million range.
Right.
So this space is the addition to that stage 1, which is really the keystone of the project.
Okay.
That has had, which is pretty much done. It allows them to use the space.
So stage 1 was about 16 million.
Yeah,
and we didn't contribute to that.
No, sure, already.
No, we didn't.
Yes. Oh, was it? Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah.
You're right, Josh. I've been round there, and you have too, obviously. But everyone that's listening, that if you stand there and look at it from the road, the top floor on the right-hand side is totally, I wouldn't say barricaded, it's partitioned off because it can't be used because of that fire sprinkler
Yeah, correct.
debacle,
correct.
for want of a better word, until this other stage gets done. So you actually get a lot more opened up by doing this bit.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is extremely late. It's not just a little bit you see from the road. There's a lot that goes round to the left. It's actually quite remarkable what's been done. Tyler, please.
Did that shovel really come through us, or was that external?
Crown
Yeah,
infrastructure.
it didn't come through us yet.
Kia ora, guys.
Kia ora.
Have we funded the youth hub at all?
No, we funded 298 Youth Health in their previous iteration, but for this project, no.
So nothing towards the capital injection of the youth hub, just to be clear.
None.
Cool. The next question is collaboration. The organisations that are currently sitting in the youth hub with potential to be leasing out the youth hub, do you have a list available, Danielle?
Yeah, so the core tenants that'll be in there are Youth Line, Te Tahi Youth, and Voice Canterbury. But then that mezzanine level that would open if we had this event space is for hot desking. So that's for a lot of the other community organisations across Christchurch.
Great. So Youth Line are going to have a call centre, from what Sue was telling me, which is actually safer because they're going to be locked off, correct?
Yeah, more
There's quite a lot
security.
Cool.
Yeah.
The next question is around the scope. So I've got colleagues who are a little bit worried about the number, and I'm just trying to think about comparisons along the other stuff that we've funded. Can you remind me in the last long-term plan how much Shirley Community Centre might have costed?
I don't know that, to be honest.
Yeah, Edgewood Pool. So again, $2 million is coming from us and potentially 500k from Rata. Is that correct?
Yep.
Great.
Shirley was about 3.6 million.
Okay.
What about South Library?
24.
32 million.
Yeah. Okay. And for
The key thing is for external organisations rather than
for
internal.
public knowledge, the Capital Endowment Fund itself, is it rates funded?
No.
No. So there's no rates implication going into the youth hub.
No, it's budgeted for already.
Okay, great. And the last question is, are we able to plan some visits for the elected members to maybe check out the area?
Yeah, so Melissa has actually offered for any elected members that would like to visit, so I can get that in your calendars this afternoon if you'd like.
That'd be great, Danielle. Thank you so much. Thanks, team.
Victoria.
Oh, thank you. Just two quick issues. The first is recognising our ongoing commitment to the youth sector. How much, in terms of resources, are we already contributing to the youth sector?
So I think we ran some stats on our community funding, and the youth sector gets any year somewhere between 15 to 20% of the community funding pot. The youth sector is very well organised in Christchurch, and actually I think that's part of why this has come about, because the organisations are willing to work together to share spaces, and that's really advantageous in terms of cost saving, in terms of referring to one another's agencies, and that's one of the reasons that we really like it. Is it potentially that some of the investment that we send in future years can be more targeted into the right places, and this would be one of those.
Okay, so being a little bit more specific in terms of the next 10 years, the long-term plan, how much money have we got on budget for the youth sector? Are you able to quantify that?
We don't specify.
Well, we'd probably just say the average is about that 20%, and that's generally what it's been over the last 5 years. So
Yeah, we don't ring fence money for the youth sector specifically. We keep it for community as a whole, and then present that to councillors, because in any given year, the priority on different community sectors can rise and fall.
And then the other issue is recognising that this is primarily an event space. Have we done an audit in terms of what is available that could be utilised? And where will I find that information? Or did I just not read it in the report?
A formal audit, we've done a youth places and spaces audit, and that was we could provide that for you.
Yeah, that I'd be grateful. I could spend days looking for it.
Yeah, our events team have commented, and that's in the report, which is essentially that a small event space like this is really needed, particularly in the central city for young people. We wouldn't use it for council events, because council events we focus on the larger scale, but certainly it'd be really well utilised by the youth sector.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, just in the assessment, I'm just wondering if we had assessed this against the Youth Action Plan and our previous youth policy or strategy.
The Youth Action Plan is a 2015 document, and it touches on objectives that the sector want to see. We consider it in all our work. We didn't directly tie it into the assessment of this application, and the second one was...
So we used to have a youth policy which had some very specific things that we would do for young people.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
in
So
a city
that-
venue, youth housing,
Yep.
all the things that the youth hub's doing.
Yep.
But there's no kind of specific reference to that.
So
in
that
here.
has been absorbed into what's now the Equity and Inclusion Policy. which is referenced, and we did assess against that. And all of our sector-based policies, the youth, the older persons, the disability, fall under now the equity and inclusion policy, because it was a 1998 document.
Yeah.
At the
But
time.
the key things, as I understand it, that the Youth Hub are delivering are things that for many decades we've said that we would support as a council, consistent with our policies, our strategies, and the engagement that we've done with young people.
Yep. I think consistently when we engage with the youth sector, the number one thing that comes out again and again is accessible, low-cost places and spaces. And so we feel really strongly that it hits on what the youth sector have told us as council that they want to see in the city.
And does the youth housing come into that? I mean, I know we've got a housing plan as well. Did we mention youth housing, supporting youth housing?
Yeah, a big part of stage one of the build supports transitionary housing for young people. We haven't referenced it so much in this report because we're focusing on the event space, but the project as a whole, and this is where it all kind of comes together, definitely has that as an
Strongly suggest you go around and see it.
Like I've
of the
been, and
service.
you don't need to convince me, but I just think in terms of selling it to the colleagues and to the public around what we're achieving, for me, like, you know, someone that's been involved in working with young people for a long time and involved in that strategy in 98, being on the working party, like, this meets that criteria, all those things that we've said we would do, that we've never done. Now we have an opportunity to do it. So I just think it's good to call it out, particularly that youth housing stuff, even though I know it's not specifically related to this, but it's been a major issue. And the underage venues as well.
Sarah?
No, it's been answered, thanks.
You done? Tyrone?
Got it. Thank you. So, I mean, look, there's been a lot of research. We know that, like, youth left to their own devices there's lots of research on this. We'll get into trouble giving them something to do. We'll help them develop. So, do we have kind of any numbers around, like, we understand that a youth hub would be a fantastic thing, but do we just sort of know, what the size of the problem is and how many, kids we're looking to help and support, and what will actually more importantly attract them there? Because we can build all the youth hubs we need, but if we can't get kids to them, then it's a bit like cycleways.
I think that's
It's a two-part question actually, so I've got to follow up.
yeah. I can talk to the second part. In terms of activating the spaces and getting people along, I think that's why the Youth Hub relies so heavily on partnership, because they work with all the key youth organisations across Christchurch. They're also drawing in all of those networks and pools of young people, and just looking at some of the things they plan on having in the event space, it does touch on a lot of sort of niche hobbies and what's attractive to different young people. So I think there is a pool there to get people in the doors.
Okay, that's cool. The proof is in the pudding, really, a little bit. So you've got it's a bit chicken and egg. The second thing is, like, given the the amount of research that supports this kind of intervention for young people, what's the argument for government money? If it's an intervention that works, mental health, youth development, all of these things. This is MSD stuff. This is Ministry of Youth Development stuff. Why is it a council thing?
And I think you're right. They've received some government funding for that first stage, and we've included that in the PDF. The event space is less a government priority on running events and having accessible places.
Why did you say it wasn't a government priority?
I probably shouldn't speak on their behalf, but
Well, just to clarify that, because that sort of
yeah.
Okay, but carry on. Sorry.
And I think, like what you say, proof is in the pudding to some extent. Which groups end up utilising it will affect who ends up attending it. I know that they've talked about having inquiries about tenancies already from dance companies to small theatres to disability groups because it's accessible. But government contributions, hard to comment on.
Kia ora, guys. I've got two broader questions as the portfolio dude. The first one is, can you please let the public know around the scope of the whole project in itself? Because what that does is it actually contextualises the event centre. So just in a quick list, just list of what they're doing in terms of what they're offering in terms of stage 1, which will then move into stage 2.
Yeah, I can touch on that. So some of the big components of stage 1, and there's quite a few aspects to it, but one of the bigger things is that there's 23 bedroom units, so there'll be 23 units of accommodation for young people, and it's longer term accommodation than a lot of the other offerings out there, so it's more than the usual 3 months for some other places. There's an outdoor events courtyard, and then they've also already established the wraparound services building that has those 3 core youth organisations that I spoke on before, and part of their bigger picture more further down the line would be to have band practice rooms that align with the event space, also a cafe and art and rec spaces that sort of talk to what's happening in the event centre. So it's quite a big piece of work overall.
And all that stuff is now finished right now, just about practically ready to go, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
The last time I was there.
Yeah, so last time we got an update from the Youth Hub, part of stage 1 was set to open in November, so a lot of it is already up and running and existing. So
Right.
Okay.
The second question, Mr. Mayor, if that's all right,
Yeah.
is the state of the youth sector. Now, we've put that in my first portfolio report, and we're going to be working on one coming up in September. But the state of the youth sector at the moment, can you please just give the room a feel of where youth are at the moment, and potentially how this youth hub could benefit from the youth hub within itself?
yeah, so that's a big one to sort of sum up. But from a lot of conversations that we have with young people, it's about having a sense of belonging in your city, a place that you can connect with other people. So it's that social aspect. It's finding things that you're passionate about to give you that sense of purpose. So in a lot of ways, this project can be a bit of a catalyst for that. Also because there'll be a lot of on-site services, health professionals, as well as other youth provisions. It's a one-stop shop to receive support. And actually by having all the services in one place, it's hoped that you won't sort of fall through the cracks like a lot of our young people do, because it can be a barrier going to all these different agencies, and then often you're lost. So it's a space where you can not only get that social cohesion but that professional trained support as well.
Okay. Straight to Aaron, then Tim.
Yeah, my main concern is Tyler's questions around the value of the amount we're putting in here versus other projects pretty much cleared off my first one, so thanks for that, Tyler, you did a good job. And my question is just around the disadvantages, and because we've got issues with noise in other places, some people think living in the inner city is meant to be super quiet with no life, and so they can complain when there's a cafe that was there before they moved in next door and they can hear the clanging of teacups and things. Is a problem in the city. So are we concerned that might happen here? I mean, it is written in the report.
Yeah, when we went round, I think certainly the sense we got is that they're very cognizant of the sound. Numerous occasions, probably more than I needed, perhaps, they showed us the different types of soundproofing in each of the rooms, in each of the areas. I forget the material.
Yeah.
Coreflex
Melissa talked
or
about
something.
it a lot.
That they're very, very cognizant, both in terms of building in a way that keeps noise impact in the neighbourhood to a minimum, as well as actually how they deliver the events throughout the year.
Have they said anything around operating hours within that? Because I wouldn't expect this is going to be late night. This would be...
I wouldn't expect it would be late night. I'd have to follow up with them on that.
What's that? The what?
Yeah.
Youth line will be running late all the way through the night, from what Sue was telling us.
Yeah, I mean, generally on a
Teenagers
sensitive
stay
youth
up
line
late.
call, you're not talking really loud, but so that stuff.
And there
makes
is an
sense.
on-site guy that will be going around during
But
the
with
transition
more of the event stuff, that'd be
questions
pre
you got,
10
mate?
p.m. Pre 10 p.m.
I'd imagine so. I'd have to confirm for you, but I can't imagine it would be late nights,
Till
parties,
raves and stuff.
I can't imagine so.
And in our conversations with the Youth Hub, they had made an effort to meet all the sort of surrounding neighbours, and they are trying their best to be good neighbours, and have been able to work through some of the issues that the neighbouring properties have raised.
Yeah, and the concerns are probably more around riffraff than noise, but
And lastly, Timothy.
Yeah, look, and the report's excellent, Danielle and Josh, and it does answer a lot of the questions, and they have reached out to the community, as you said, and been trying to be really good neighbours, which is a hell of a lot more than a lot of other people do. I mean, my concern is not about the and we say what we're doing. We're doing nothing in the sense that we've been asked to fund something. Outstanding work by some outstanding people, but my concern is the funding, and I think it. You know, if we're going to go and say who's funded what, look, we've got a list of things that are funded for 101 different reasons. But the facts of the matter are, we talk about a living crisis, cost of living crisis. We do have to look at other funders, and when something starts, I'd like to know the longevity of the funding for those staff, so we don't end up yet again, like we do a lot of times, and the merits are fantastic, there's no question about that, but we just want that planning and that understanding firmed up before we kick off.
Yep.
And I think that the organisation, the young people that are going to benefit from it, deserve that, actually.
Yeah. Councillor Kieran mentioned bang for buck. I think this project gives us really good bang for buck because of the co-location of services. If each of these organisations, Youthline, Puai, all of these were operating in their own facilities, these are all organisations that come to council for funding. It's better spend from a funding perspective to support one building that they're all in together than to fund each of their own centre managers and each of their own building.
Thanks, Josh.
Insurance
And
everything.
Danielle, I think you can sort of take away that there's a couple. I'll just do a couple of things. We haven't given them anything to date,
Correct.
right? I've been around there. There's a lot of product and work that has gone in kind by a lot of people. It ticks all the boxes as far as our youth policy goes, or it certainly helps go towards it. And there's lots of agencies that are going to be in that building, like you said, and they're ready to move in. The only downside is, and sort of going on Pauline says, it may cut us a bit short on what we've got left, but this is certainly the right place to put it, because it helps a lot of things that people are coming, correct me if I'm wrong, that people are coming and asking for money anyway. So
All the time.
okay, thanks very much for your presentation. Good to see you.
Thank you all.
And I'll remember your name next time, Daniel. Even though it was written in front of me. Okay. Where's young Marcus? Okay, everyone. Now we hear from Darren and Mark about rezoning properties in the district plan. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, councillors. Today's presentation is following a councillor request made on the 18th of June about rezoning properties and land in the district plan. Joining Mark and I today is Bruce Rendell, Head of Facilities and Property, to describe and explain the disposal process. So the presentation covers the following elements, and it's to give a picture in context about what zoning is, but also about how we can use it. I'll tell you about the general rezoning plan change that is currently being prepared, and we'll cover how council's own disposals may or may not fit into that process. So you can see at the top there is a useful definition of a zone and thereby zoning that comes from the explanatory documents that are part of the National Planning Standards. A zone spatially identifies and manages an area with common environmental characteristics or where environmental outcomes are sought by bundling compatible activities or effects together and controlling those that are incompatible. You'll see in the link that I put on the cover sheet that I provided a link to the National Planning Standards themselves, which are nationally described definitions of what is expected in each zone. As the name suggests, the intent is that zones are being standardised across the country, although there remains scope to define the rules within these zones depending on context and locality. Just briefly running through that. As an example, what might we expect to see in a residential zone? Houses, schools, community halls, churches, community gardens, yes. And we'll set activity standards for those in the district plan. And the more you exceed those standards, the more the council has the ability to first consider a proposal, then shape a proposal, and maybe ultimately refuse a proposal through the resource consents process, moving from permitted activities to controlled to restricted discretionary, all the way through to maybe even prohibited. In the residential zone, if you propose an activity not anticipated, that would fall under discretionary and the council would have full discretion in considering it. This way, the council can shape the environment and developers can expect certainty when proposing to build something. So on this slide, I briefly touched on why land is rezoned. Moving on to the part which addresses effects, the effects management in the Resource Management Act. Section 3 of the Act describes the meaning of an effect, and that can include any positive or adverse effect, any temporary or permanent effect, any past, present or future effect, any cumulative effect which arises over time or in combination with other effects, and also includes, regardless of the scale, intensity, duration or frequency of the effect, and also includes any potential effect of high probability and any potential effect of low probability which has a high potential impact. So in terms of that last point, rezoning would not happen specifically for financial gain, but often this can coincide based on what the future anticipated use of a piece of land might be, taking into consideration all of these factors. So I'm sure councillors have seen this slide before, which briefly outlines the plan change process. It's useful to reiterate that to rezone a piece of land takes this process as defined by Schedule 1 in the RMA. It's also worth remembering that for the time period between notification and decision, up to 2 years are allowed for by the RMA as a reflection of how long this part of the process can sometimes take. The plan change that we're currently preparing is in effect a continuation of the work commenced in Plan Change 5F, Planning Maps, and I put a link in the cover sheet to that. The current plan change is interrogating the potential for zone changes under the scope as listed above. Plan Change 5F has already done a lot of this, but the plan is a living document and this is reflected in the potential for sites to be rezoned, always increasing. One thing that I want to add to the list up there, which I didn't actually put on the slide, is parks notices as well. We'll also be considering. One aspect which has increased numbers for interrogation in this plan change has been the use of the council's mapping system to cross-reference, for instance, where split zones are across the entire district. Lists of sites can be made quite rapidly, although then each site would then need to be analysed for its own specifics. One thing to note with the plan change being prepared is that it will exclude all areas covered by PC14 because decisions cannot be made until that process is concluded. The next slide covers disposals, and Bruce will cover that with you.
Thanks, Darren. So this is just really the council properties that might be picked up in the rezoning plan change. So these relate to those properties that you've already resolved to dispose. So what we do once you've made those decisions, we have a variety of tests that we look at, including around the Reserves Act, Public Works Act, and zoning. And we work through those aspects before we actually put the properties in the market. Why we do that? If a property is zoned inappropriately, then we will get less return from it. So we're wanting to try and get that highest and best use from it. And in some cases, the council may, when it's disposing of a property, want to zone it to meet a specific need in line with the rest of the district plan. So that's why we've got some properties included in this this zoning change. I think there's 2 or 3 that will be included in it. I'll hand back to Darren.
Thanks, Bruce. Any questions?
Yanni?
In terms of rezoning, like what's become really apparent is there's some sorts of activities that we just didn't anticipate, didn't comprehend in terms of our district plan. So particularly around things like the industrial area. And it just seems that they could be quite straightforward to rezone an activity from one to the other. Can you just kind of help me understand the difference between the rezoning the land process and the rezoning the activities? And I mean, the classic example is industrial general and industrial heavy. Scrap metal yards should be an industrial heavy, not an industrial general. If you read the strategic directions around that chapter, it's really obvious that that's supposed to be the low impact activities adjacent to residential that have minimal impact, not heavy industry that has a big impact on the residents. So to me, it seems as simple as just, and I know it's not this simple, but it does seem to me it should be relatively simple just to change an activity from one to the other, or to at least name an activity as part of a rezoning process, given that we know the problems that it's causing. Can you help me just kind of understand a little bit about how we could do that?
Yeah, so as you're no doubt familiar, the district plan has a series of zones, and within those industrial zones, the rules are more enabling, obviously, of the types of activities we envisage in industrial zones. The intent, and this goes back to the former city plan, was that between a residential area and a heavy industrial area, we would have this lighter industrial zone, which was originally known as the Business 4 zone. That became a industrial general zone for the last district plan review. And what we've found is there's activities that are establishing in that industrial general zone, which was intended for lighter industrial activities that are more benign, and which are having an adverse effect on residential neighbours, and which arguably should be more appropriate within in the heavy industrial areas. We're looking at that in the context of the zoning as it stands. The plan change that we're advancing on the industrial residential interface, and which a memo will go to councillors on today, just with an update on that, and is set for notification at the end of this year. That's looking at what the appropriate activity status is of those activities that have occurred in areas that are close to residential neighbours, and consideration of making the activity status more stringent or more difficult pathway to get consent within those areas than heavy industrial areas. So directing those activities that have greater impact into the heavy industrial areas by making the rules more enabling in those areas. And
I guess I'm just kind of missing what the point of this plan change is on rezoning. Like when I look at the bottom line, specific sites, unique circumstances, to me that kind of screams out, the Kingaway site, for example, which is effectively an land walk that got established without any sort of consideration of the environment. Well, it's basically the scale of the activity was probably maybe unforeseen, or has got certain things that are quite unique. So what is the difference between this plan change and the other one?
So this one is looking at rezoning properties potentially from commercial to residential, or from in the context of what you're describing, it would involve a property being rezoned from industrial to something else. That would change the rules that apply within that area, as opposed to the plan change that we're advancing for the industrial residential interface, which is looking at keeping the zoning as it is, what should be the activity status for car wreckers, for the storage of containers, and keeping the zoning so it still allows for what I say is light industrial uses on those sites you are familiar with, but making it harder to establish activities that are going to have a greater impact.
One is that if we're looking to put in designations, that we don't seem to have sufficient capacity to protect river corridors or transport as well. So really keen to get an understanding of, in terms of our transport thinking, around what we're looking to do around designations around protecting corridors. I know we've done it in the past for roading, but we've never had that conversation as a council. And, I've still got designations from the 60s on Ferry Road, but I've never been approached with a new designation, which is what, Christchurch, the obvious one, which I've roads, we've got a whole bunch of development that's impacting the safety of pedestrians. So I'd be really interested in understanding more about the opportunities for using designations for our transport corridor.
We can
undo this. And safety. And the other thing is looking at greater protection of our river corridors as well.
So on designations, we can provide some advice in writing of what designations are for and the scope of what they can be used for.
Kelly, please.
Thanks, guys. Is there any work being done on rural fringe properties and how that the number of houses on a rural fringe property could be expanded, for instance?
So separate from this is, and ahead of the review of the regional policy statement, just taking a step back, the regional policy statement defines the extent of the urban area and where housing and business can go at a higher level than the district plan. That, generally speaking, doesn't allow for housing and other forms of urban development within the rural zones. To inform the council's position going into the regional policy statement review, which is being formally notified at the end of this year, we're doing some work looking at the rural zones at the present time. At the moment, they're all effectively around the city's edge. There's just one zone, but we recognise that there's parts of that zone that are more like a lifestyle area. There's other parts that still have productive uses on them for a range of rural activities, and looking at whether there's parts of that rural zone that could be identified for future urban development.
Okay, so in the case of say a property of a certain size, which as rural fringe could only have one property on it, is it likely that it would change so that they might be able to say have two? Is that the nature of the change? And still have some arable land.
Part of that that is to be considered for the regional policy statement. At the moment, the current RPS precludes effectively a lifestyle zone around the city's edge. There's a potential option there to explore that further and reducing the lot size within the areas on the fringe of the city that are effectively a lifestyle zone at the moment, but allowing for smaller lot sizes. We need to do that in collaboration with ECAN to ensure there's still enough land for sewage disposal and water supply, but that's something we've got on our radar.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Kelly. And lastly, Tyrone, please.
Thank you. So just take Littleton, just thinking of Littleton. So at the moment, there are at least 12 empty sites from the earthquake that I can think of on the main street alone, including like a really famous example of some residents who wanted to build a slightly out of the box house that kind of didn't fit in with the urban design panels, direction or whatever it was. Then there's another probably 12 on the bottom street that we lost from the earthquake that, nothing's happening. What I feel like we need, first of all, do you think that the current the zoning is working for Littleton? And secondly, what kind of can we do to really get a step change? And I know that we have talked in the past about the port noise overlay, but what are the things that we can do and get that kind of bumped up in the priority list to really get a step change for Littleton so that we can actually see some activity there?
So obviously you'll be familiar obviously with the Suburban Centre Master Plan for Littleton and the identification of actions to which amongst other things sought greater connection between the town centre and the water. There's obviously the vacant sites along Norwich Quay, and there's options we're just exploring to come back to you with advice on about the ability for residential activity to establish in that area, but recognising obviously we need to support the port and its operations. So there's a tricky balance there, and we'll report back on those options for the sites on Norwich Quay if that's. But
Norwich Quay good, but London Street as well, because there's about 12 empty sites on London Street.
Yeah, so there's in the urban regeneration space, there's work that's happened in the implementation of the master plan, but I can go away and understand more about what we can do to activate some of those sites. Certainly there's some of the enlivened spaces funding has been used for instance, Colette's Corner. There's been some activation of that space to support the market and provide pathways through that site, and we can support activation of those vacant sites until development does come along. In terms of making that development occur through Christchurch NZ as well as our own urban regeneration team, we can talk to, and case management, we can talk to developers, understand what's impeding progress on those sites. And
yeah, thanks, Mark. Because I guess it just seems like every time anybody wants to actually build something on London Street, it just all becomes too hard. So they just go, "Oh, stuff it. I'm just going to go." And I was just reading here about one person who had some property on London Street and then just went up to Auckland and invested there because it was just all too hard to do in Littleton. Need so many car parks and all this kind of stuff. Car parks that there's just no space. But there's just whatever the impediments are. I just feel like that we just need to kind of unlock that somehow. That's just so that's my comments.
Good question. Thank you, gentlemen, for the update.
thank you.
Right. Okay, the next team is in here in about 4 minutes. So you want to have a quick coffee or a? Yeah, no, it's break till 2 o'clock. 3 minutes.
I know. I thought you were saying to come back.
No, don't let me. 3 minutes. we have Jane and Lynette and Mark, who are here to tell us about the draft Otatahi Christchurch Transport Strategy. Fire away.
Go. I'll go.
It's the Jane show.
All right. Kia ora koutou. As the Mayor said, we've come back to talk about the proposed approach to our draft transport strategy. We haven't come to talk to you about this work for a while. If you'll recall, we had a series of future transport briefings in the second half of last year, and we've had a bit of a sequencing pause to get through the LTP and to find out the coalition government's policy directions, so we can sort of understand what our landscape looks like at the moment. So that's been pretty beneficial, and we'll talk about having that pause has been beneficial, and particularly in terms of what level we pitch this work at, and we can talk more about that as we go through the presentation. So the purpose of today is to show you what is it, why are we doing now, what's the frame, the sort of sketch of it before we finalise it, rather than coming to councillors with a here's what we prepared earlier finished product. It's an opportunity to see how we're framing it up at this point in time and have a bit of a conversation about what's important to you in the context of this work. So if it's all right with the chair, I might have a couple of pause points to take questions throughout. Thank you. All right, so let's get into it.
Tell them what this is first.
Oh yes, thank you, Lynette.
That's right.
So I have given you a handout. The handout is basically plan on a page. I always find it useful to be able to see all the moving parts on one page. So when we go through the detail of this, when we come back to it, I'm hoping that it'll be useful in terms of asking questions and stuff like that. Yeah. All right. So what is this work, and why do we need a strategic direction? So what's our why? The difference with this one and the LTP is it's got a 30-year horizon, and it's at a citywide and whole-of-network approach or level. When there is a strategic area focus, it tends to be at a like a priority centre kind of level. Ideally, it guides both of our transport capital planning and our policy and planning, transport policy and planning work programs. So it cuts right across the work that we do across council and ensures that we're really clear about what we're doing with our residents. At the moment, a lot of our transport strategy is the story is told in lots of different places. So the idea is to bring it all together in this one and have a conversation with the community. One point that we do want to make up front is that we want to position this work as part of your transport system stewardship role as governors. And on the other side of that slide, there's this, I guess what I'm calling the stewardship toolkit, which is investment in delivery and the decisions that and the priorities that we make through the long-term and annual planning processes, which is a lot of where our conversations happen in this space currently. But we also have the ability to plan and get a pipeline in place at a spatial and network level. We also have policy and regulatory tools. And I think the really important thing in this space is we can't succeed without partnering really well with others. So just wanted to paint that picture, and we'll kind of loop back around to that at the end. So why now? The 30-year plan hasn't been updated since 2012, and that's quite a while ago. And the context for the plan was clearly very different at that point in time. Very much earthquake recovery. It set the foundations for the cycle network. So it's overdue a refresh, but there will be a degree of continuity that comes through as well. You'll see from the timeline at the bottom, this work's been in development for quite some time. I haven't been around for the whole gestation period. I think I came in just before the local government election point there. But it is time to land it. if we're going to land it at this stage. Another good thing is we're at the start of a 3-year statutory planning cycle. That's a good place to start, and then we can kind of roll through into the next LTP. I noted being clearer with our residents, and I think a really important point is that having a strategy is beneficial when engaging with the transport funding system. And Lynette, is there anything that you want to say about that?
No, except very briefly that there is a very strong expectation that there's clear line of sight, if you like, about why we're doing what we're doing. So this provides us this is the strategic case, if you like, around the business case work that we do with NZTA. So it sets the framework for what we're doing and what we're asking for in the funding space.
Thank you. It's always good to look at what you've achieved when you, since the last plan, well, you know, before going forward. And when we look back, there's a lot of really great stuff that has been achieved since 2012. Massive investment in the earthquake recovery. A significant proportion of the MCR network has been finished. And alongside that, a 40% increase in cyclists on the network. We've had public transport infrastructure improvements. The central city is completely a completely different beast. Got a question over there. And we have made the safety story is a really good start. There's been a 14% reduction in deaths and serious injuries on the network since 2012. But as we'll see in a minute, there's still quite a lot to do. One other point that I want to make here is we don't know what we don't know. If you'd asked me in 2012 whether there would be 4.9 million rideshare trips on the network at over 8.2 million kilometres, I could not have answered that question. So I think it's really important to acknowledge and stay flexible for the opportunities that come up as well, and we can touch on that too. Now there was one question over there. I might just do one more slide and then I'll pause for questions if that's all right. And Victoria too? Okay, great. So just finishing off this set part of the presentation. A really important part of this is what's important to our residents. Now this is a pretty busy slide, so I'll just pull out some themes. It's very obvious from the What Matters Most survey that was conducted before this most recent LTP is that transport's at the top of the pile, with the things that are important to our residents, with roads and footpaths and travel choices up there in lights. Doing the basics better is a theme that comes through in terms of a consistent theme in terms of road and footpath maintenance that councillors are all familiar with. There are some spaces of consensus, or broad consensus. Public transport's a good example of that. Most people see the benefit of, most residents see the benefit of public transport, and that comes through. I was really interested to see in the submission submission themes from the LTP. Many submitters agreed that we should explore different ways of doing things, and some of the themes around lower cost infrastructure in some spaces coming through, and I think that's an interesting theme for us right now. And finally, there are polar spaces in here as well in terms of what people want from a network, and we're all familiar with those spaces, whether it be certain types of safety infrastructure or different views around cycle networks or the way that we use the road space. There are going to be contested spaces in here, and I think we need to acknowledge that up front with this work. So I'll take a pause there, and through the chair, if there are any questions.
And then Tyler.
Thank you very much. I'm all for a strategic planning and direction, but to my mind, a strategy should really be designed to help us prioritise where we're going to concentrate our limited funds, and we simply can't do everything all at once. And I'm just having difficulty deciphering, or I can't figure out how this is going to help us in terms of where we're prioritising our funding. in terms of its usefulness for us.
Okay.
I think if I can jump in there, any strategy, council's own strategic framework needs to provide a long-term outlook. It needs to be clear in terms of messaging and what we're trying to achieve, and give transparency of that to stakeholders, including in this case Waka Kotahi as well as others across the sector. As we'll come on to discuss, there's a number of aspects to the long-term outcome, what goals we're seeking over the long term. The priorities of what we will do in the short term or even the medium term will vary, and over time our priorities will change. That reflects the funding environment as well as the economic climate as well as other environmental factors. So the transport strategy shouldn't be framed around what might be a priority today. It should be looking long term at what we'd want for the future of the transport system beyond that, and acknowledge that this is important to guide decision making, but some of those priorities will change. So what our priorities are in 20 years might be quite different to what they are over the next 3 years. And that short-term outlook of what our priorities are in the next 3-year interval will come through the long-term plan and annual plan processes. What we're discussing here is over a longer time horizon, what do we want to achieve? So
Will this help us to make our transport decisions when we review these next month? This is where I'm just trying to figure out the usability and the effectiveness of this. Or how will it help us?
I think what it does is it helps inform those decisions in terms of the trade-offs that elected members need to make at any given decision point. So if we're saying that some of the challenges that we face with our transport system are reducing emissions, building more resilience into the network, having those as part of the trade-off discussion with supporting information from staff to help you make those decisions is the best that we can do in what is quite a volatile funding environment at any given time, if that makes sense.
My overriding concern is around it doesn't help us depoliticise the whole transport conversation, really, and that is what it is.
I'm not sure personally that we've got a tool that will do that. Just to be realistic. But the other thing that I see, and the reason I see this as an important piece of work for us, is that it helps guide the path. I was going to use a really bad analogy there. The roadmap to get there, to get to the next 30 years. And while things might push and change in that, ultimately our long-term vision is that, and we can tell that story and have that conversation with our funding providers and our partners as well.
Okay. Yeah, right, Tom.
It's really good.
It's important.
Yeah.
Kia ora, team. I'm really surprised at that slide at the bottom with the pause work being only at 6%. I usually hear a lot more noisier voices, I guess, in this area. But in thinking about that, in terms of the cycle infrastructure, and thinking about this, I'm trying to figure out where the micro-mobility things come into this. And I'm well-travelled around the country now, and I've seen some really bad roads and bad footpaths and blown pipes, and I feel like this city's got something really cool to offer. But the cool thing about Christchurch is the micro-mobility part of it. So what I saw in Wellington was an organisation who do a Lime version of vehicles. So they've got an electric vehicle fleet and a hybrid vehicle Suzuki fleet.
Yep.
I'm wondering, around that, I see that it's under Goal 5 of the Genuine Transport Choices for Everyone. You're capitalising on the micro-mobility part of it, of how people are travelling differently. Where would that come into our city's plans if they don't come to us? Is there an ability for us to go to those organisations in terms of allowing that to happen in our city?
I guess it depends what we procure.
I think can we parking like that question, councillor, and get through a few more slides and see if it helps frame that up.
Great.
Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
So
Of course.
it is partly a procurement discussion, and it's partly not. Chances are, yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So yeah, I think we've got both options, but I think let's come back to your question if it's all right.
And hold this one too. Free electric shuttles around the city. Hold that one. I've got some questions about that later.
All right.
Yeah, Yanni and sorry, Sarah, then Yanni.
Okay.
Thanks. Just partly in response to Councillor Henstock's, this was originally planned to be consulted on ahead of the LTP or alongside it to help us guide those decisions, kind of like we did the climate strategy last LTP. So it would have helped, although in the end we wouldn't have been able to make the changes. But given that the government's talking about that long-term decision making, getting a framework into place, and having documents that last us more than just every 3 year just LTP stuff, this strategy will help us with that long-term planning, so that when we come to that budgeting at the next LTP, that we'll have all of those priorities in place, and we'll know the direction that we're heading in for that funding.
That's the intention.
That's the intention.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
And just to reaffirm what Lynette was saying earlier, a core part of the business case process, which is part of getting the investment from government partners, but other partners, is demonstrating you've got a strategic framework in place.
But just to clarify, so this is a framework that's aimed at what's needed for our city,
yes,
rather than a how do we get the most money document, because that will come into the implementation, and that will vary depending on who the government is and what their priorities are and what we prioritise at the time as we're looking to do that. But this is a what's needed for our city.
This is a long-term.
And then we can target the individual bits of it depending on the government. Yeah.
Yes, this is a long-term vision.
Yeah.
Yanni, please.
Yeah, just I guess just trying to understand, like, in terms of the chart. I mean, there's kind of this thing about that roads and cycling are two different things. Actually, like when we actually renew a road, we do actually think about cycle markings or pedestrian safety or trees, and I just wonder around this whole binary kind of presentation of information that it's either one or the other doesn't really help in terms of the narrative. We used to have a thing called Living Streets, which actually picks up on renewing the road infrastructure, so fixing the footpaths, fixing the roads, often looked at pedestrian crossings or safer for the amenity or for cycling. I'm just wondering if there's a different way that we can kind of frame these things so that we don't get into this binary debate, car versus cycle, when actually it's just not even accurate around how we do things.
100% agree, Councillor. We really do agree that this sheet is really just trying to present the information that's been with you recently. So, but that's definitely something that we're looking at right at the moment is how do we not have a binary discussion.
And the only other thing is just, I mean, I still feel like one of the biggest challenges that we have as a city is the earthquake repairs. I mean, we're not going to get back to where we were the day of the earthquakes or the moment in time of the earthquakes for probably another 30 years. So there's still a huge gap of catch up. And I just don't see this really acknowledged or expressed in this. And I mean, certainly it's feedback I've gotten previously when we've discussed it.
Where do you get these numbers from, bud?
Where do I get the numbers from?
Yeah, 30 years. I think we're a damn sight better off than we were before the earthquake now.
Infrastructure strategy. So if you look at our asset management around our infrastructure strategy, it's really clear that we have a significant way to go. And because we haven't been investing in the quantum required for the renewals to keep pace, we're falling further and further behind.
But the roads were perfect before the earthquake.
No, just to get back to the level, the condition that they were before the earthquakes, we still have a massive amount of work to be done.
Through the chair, I think that's another one that we circle back to after a few more slides.
Yeah, right. I've got a question on the one before, please. The page. Sorry. Oh, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
When it says new priority bus lanes in Lincoln Road have helped grow patronage by 59% since 2015, I'm sure they have, but they've only been in for a year. Shouldn't we be looking at just 1 year earlier and see how much the bus lanes have made? You could go back to 1940 and say, well, it's gone up 200%, which it probably has. But I think it's sort of playing with numbers and making it look better than it is.
Yeah, I think we wanted to look at a more of a 5-year rolling average, but point noted.
Okay, and just to follow up on what Tyler was saying, whilst Jake and Vic and I were in China, we saw a whole lot of little shuttle buses, not tiny, but good ones. So I've actually asked the guy if the guy brings them in how much they are, so we can get an idea. And they're electric, and they hold about 15 people. So it's I think it'd be something that we could look at going forward. So sorry, carry on.
Okay.
That is something that the council drove a wee while ago, and my understanding was because we had smaller buses doing some of the routes, but ECAN were resistant to it. Is that correct? Because that's what I understood anyway.
Do it and buy them and do it ourselves.
Under Red Bus, we actually had some smaller buses doing, which was fantastic and really worked.
So we'd really like to pull this back up to our objectives of a strategy.
Yeah, typical.
If that's right, through the chair.
Yeah, shut up, Philip, and shut up, Tim.
Okay. We'll keep moving. So these next slides are an overview of the proposed refresh of the document, and part of it matches the one pager that you've got in front of you. So like any good strategy, we look at what we're planning for in the 30-year horizon. None of this will be new to any of the councillors sitting around this table. Growth, both population within the city and the sub-region, housing intensification, which will be up and out. If we're looking at the sub-region, equals more people wanting to travel on the same amount of road space and more people dependent on streets for their public space as an equation. Equitable and inclusive access. I find the statistics around 7% of households in Christchurch having no car and 13% of adults not holding a licence to be reasonably sobering in terms of the ease with which a reasonable portion of the population can access travel options. So I think that's a really important consideration for us from an equity perspective as we think about the strategy as well. We've got the risk kete around natural hazards, climate change. We know that transport emissions are a big chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions profile in the district. We know that climate change, the effects of climate change from an adaptation perspective are going to hit the transport network, and we know that we've got some ways to go in terms of improving safety outcomes on the network as well. On the upside, technological change will be helpful in some ways. The 2023 projection for the transition to zero emission vehicles on the network by 2045 at 61%. That's going to help us considerably to lower our emission profile, but it's not going to get us all the way to our targets, which we'll touch on in a minute as well. So there's a few things in there that we need to keep an eye on from a planning perspective. One thing to go back to Councillor Templeton's point that we want to do with the refresh more explicitly is make it very much a strategy for our city in terms of what we want to get out of our transport network. If you look at our strategic priorities and community outcomes, transport is woven throughout in terms of an asset that will help us achieve multiple outcomes in there. Our infrastructure strategy and the direction that sets us in terms of looking after what we've got and planning for risk and opportunity on the network, our climate change targets, and the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan that's been adopted by Council, which gives us the strategic priority of planning along public transport corridors focusing growth around centres. All of these are really important things for us to thread through into this strategy. We've had a crack at drafting up a vision statement which pulls those threads through. So I've underlined the words there that that pick up on the priorities that this council has articulated. That vibrant, prosperous, climate resilient district, that city shaping role, that connectivity, everyone in terms of that equity question, and that safe and easy to move around as well across the whole district. So hopefully that resonates. Just as a comparison, the previous vision statement in the 2012 plan was keep Christchurch moving forward by providing transport choices to connect people and places. So we've kind of added a few more nuances to this update. One thing that I did want to just focus on at this point was what we see as the key strategic challenges that we are planning for in this plan. So equitable transition to low emissions, adapting the network to climate change, managing growth well, and reducing deaths and serious injuries on the network are the four that we've kind of picked out that to really focus planning on, because they're tricky and they're potentially expensive. So I think there's another underpinning challenge here, which is affordability, that we pick up later, but it's a very important and real part of the challenges that we have as well. All right, so if those are our challenges, what are our transport goals? So right in the middle, we're proposing that managing transport assets well kind of underpins everything else. It helps us achieve an accessible network, the right movement in the right places, resilience, safety, other parts of it, how we move on the network, genuine transport choices, which we'll get into. I think that the word genuine is important because it needs to be a competitive choice. And the whole vibrant and livable city. Our streets play a huge role in that. Okay, I'm going to pause. I did see a couple of hands up.
Tyler and then Mark, please.
Quick couple. That bottom picture there, is that the AI tech that the transport team are using?
Which one?
That patch
on the right.
Yep.
Yes.
Is that the technology that they're using to track the patches? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Oh, the potholes.
Is it a multi-seed deflectometer?
Multi-speed deflectometer. No, it's a.
Well, the reason why I'm saying that is because
it's basically a pre-seal repair that they've marked out or has been marked out electronically.
Okay, because Steve was saying that there's development happening in terms of innovation with UC, with AI tech being able to scope out all potholes in the city when they drive past them.
Yep, again.
Okay, no, the reason why I'm saying that is an overarching thing in terms of the way that we're managing our assets.
We come to this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, next one.
Yeah,
fine.
No, you're on.
Yeah, we're on it.
And do you also have breakdowns on seasonal road use in that, in terms of the way that we use our vehicles in winter in comparison to what we would in the summer months?
Not for the strategy. We don't get down to that level of detail.
Yeah. Because that would sort of help define the strategy with seasonal uptake during the winter months. Do you sort of get where I'm coming from? Because people, I personally didn't like biking in the winter. Which means that
less biking. Yeah. Actually, we do have we can show seasonal use. I'm not sure we've quite got to it in this, but it's something.
It would help divert
a lot of
our
this
strategy.
discussion. So a lot of this discussion and how we move into this will also help us build, because ultimately, when Jane talks through the next steps, I didn't call you Mark. When Jane talks through the next steps, this is all part of it.
Okay,
This is
I'll
just
try and
the
keep a high
first
level.
Conversation, yeah.
Apologise.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yes,
thank
we're
you.
making note of it all. So
Here
please
we go,
don't
mate.
stop.
I'll help you out here, Lynette. My seasonal use for cycling is the same for both winter and summer.
We'll mark you down.
Well said, sir. So, will I be right in picking that one of our overarching goals in this is to try and make, for instance, public transport more reliable so people actually feel like they want to use it?
Yeah, we want patronage to go up.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
We need to build the infrastructure to allow that.
We need to plan for the infrastructure, and we need to plan in lockstep with our colleagues at ECAN around the services. So yeah, 100%.
Okay, Victoria, then Cal.
I know that me, Phil and Jake are going to laugh when I mention this word. I know we're not here to wordsmith, but when I look at the vision, there's a key component that's missing for me, and that's about efficiency.
Okay.
Life.
Efficiency is life. So, and it's interconnected to vibrancy and prosperity and connectivity and, the efficiency of our transport network. And I wonder out loud whether you'd consider replacing the easily at the end of the vision with efficiently. Because I think that efficiency has to be part of the conversation when we're looking at our transport strategy. What was that? One day I'll be back. Yeah. Put it back in.
Yep.
Kelly?
Phil might like to comment on that.
Kelly?
Yeah, just in terms of public transport, I'm unaware of how often we engage with ECAN over bus routes and developing new ones. An example being Preston's Park, a huge subdivision, no bus goes through there. Residents are asking me how to influence the process other than sending an email to ECAN. That seems to be the only way. And there's a subdivision with, some 1,200 homes in there. No bus goes through it. No immediate plans to get it sorted. People are crying out for it. Yet, I would have thought that would have been something we'd jump on.
You want me to?
Good question.
Do we just throw that to ECAN? And
I mean, ultimately, there's two land use and transport work together. In order to make public transport viable, you need a density of population, and we need to look at the core routes and provide a significant increase in terms of levels of service. If we keep expanding the network, spreading it, we lose the objective of efficiency and getting the level of service greater on the core routes where you've got the population and it can support the viability. There's in greenfield situations there are lower densities. You've got fewer people living in terms of an area. Extending a bus route does come at a cost, and you need that the population to
Mark,
make it.
This really doesn't apply here because the bus is already going around the furthest part of the two subdivisions. It doesn't come back through Preston's Park, which has 1,200 new homes, and so it actually skirts around the outside and
it's already
goes
there,
down.
but not in the right place.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
there, but
we are working.
Yeah, Brent's got a fantastic reply.
Yeah, no, just to let you know, last week Lynette and I met with our counterparts at ECAN. We're just setting up a workshop with our two operational staffs to look at the pinch points, look at where we can work better together. Right. Like simple little things with Lynette raised with the weight of the buses, and the new buses are breaking our bus stops and things like that. So we've kicked off those meetings, and hopefully we'll be able to get some progress on in collaboration going forward.
So, at a risk of
Yeah. So can I just say that?
But what we're doing today, please don't think we're not hearing what you're saying. And what we're doing today, and what we'll talk through right at the end of this, is how we take all of this information that you're giving us and build it into the next steps of what we're doing, or and how we're going to feed it back to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but we are coordinating. We at an operational level, staff are working together best best
So
endeavours.
can I just add that when I was on that joint committee, sorry, that ECAN adopted the patronage over the coverage system of running the buses. So they favoured the most highly used routes and sacrificed some coverage for that to try and get the revenue stream paying off, so that then they could use any profit from there to extend the buses back out. So a lot of areas missed out because they've chosen patronage over coverage.
Thank you. So, right, we've got Sarah, Yanni, then Jake.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. I'd like to support the use of the efficiency thing in there somewhere. I think that using the limited road space that we've got as efficiently as possible, using the evidence base to see how we move the most people the most efficiently, I think is a really good way to use our transport space. I'm not sure if switching out easily is the best way to go. It's just that really user-friendly public language, I think, is accessible language is really important. But it might fit in one of the strategy goals, I think, maybe number 4. But just, yeah, I think that the goal of efficiency, using the evidence-based approach to see how that works, I think is a really important thing for council to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Yanni, please.
So we used to have a Christchurch Metro strategy for public transport. We don't seem to have any visibility of that now, and I know it's sort of been put into regional facilities, but it does seem that there's a huge gap in terms of the city, that we're not clear about what our public transport strategy is. So I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can actually get, and the previous one was done in conjunction with ECAN, but is there a way that we can actually get a coordinated approach to public transport just within our city?
There's the regional public transport plan, which is an update has been drafted, and that is about to go through ECAN, RTC this week, and will be out for consultation soon.
But is there something more local, like that talks about, like for example, the provision of bus hubs, we used to have suburban interchanges. We used to have a strategy around it.
The GC chapter of the RTP.
That's probably, again, right. We're right down in here at the moment. We understand it. Let us take it away into how we do something like that and look for something like that. And it will be part of the discussion. Brent and I are.
Thank you.
And the only other feedback was we had a really excellent presentation around the whole kind of healthy streets framework, but that doesn't seem to, we've got vibrant and livable city, but actually the health stuff I think is really important. Is there a way that can be picked up?
Yeah, we do pick it up in some of the drafted content in the vibrant and livable city part of the document, and it'll come through in there.
I guess I just don't quite know what vibrant kind of means, whereas healthy and livable kind of seem more. I don't know how others feel, but I don't really get that vibrant.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Jake.
There's no mention of congestion charging here. Is that on?
There, we talk of pricing tools.
So we've got to get there yet. Coming.
And I'm just conscious of time because we're heading up to an hour, and we've got an hour 15, and we're at slide 11 of 22. So we might not get through everything today. So let's go. So if we dig into the goals that we were talking about, and hopefully this will start answering some of the more detailed questions that have been coming through. Taking good care of our network assets as the first goal, best practice asset management, and looking for solutions that are affordable, innovative, and sustainable. If you read, and I know that you all would have had a look at the transport operations report that came through council last week, and there were some really good examples in there of some of the resurfacing innovations that Steve Guy and his team have been putting in place that are the sort of thing that we're talking about from an implementation perspective in here. So the strategy is at that high level, and the implementation is where you start to drop into some of that detail in terms of some of the innovative practices that the team are doing heaps of. Lynette, do you want to comment on that anymore?
No, you've done perfectly
I've done
well.
it. Yay!
Yeah.
All right.
But it's it does go to Councillor Harrison Hunt's question,
Yeah.
and that's sort of where we see that playing out, and us continuing to push and look.
Yes, and what you'd start to see is sort of, if that's the strategic framework, the reporting starts to add, the implementation reporting starts to add the detail into it over time. So the Safe Transport Network, and this is one of those spaces, I said before, when with the change in government policy, a lot of some of the previous detail in the draft plan from last year is now obsolete in terms of what the regulatory environment allows, particularly around, or potentially allows, around some of the proposed rule changes around speed. So what we want to do is punt it up a level and say that we're going to prioritise our safety program through risk-based analysis. We get really great information from NZTA and Ministry of Health in terms of where crashes are happening, who they're happening to. We get great feedback from our communities in terms of safety issues on the network. And then put proven solutions in place, so the evidence-based element that address those high-risk challenges. So that's the high-level direction in there. They're really importantly to collaborate with our road safety partners. We know that there's going to be a bigger push towards enforcement over the next little while. That's a good thing. Let's partner to make the most of that with our road safety partners.
I think get through the goals and then we'll go back.
Okay, got Tyrone, then Tyler. Oh, Jack, did you have your bit?
No.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, you did too. Yeah, Tyrone, then Tyler.
Shall we get through the goals
All
and
right,
then
okay.
come back?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that we get through the slides.
Yeah, that's right.
That was just the right slide for me to ask a question.
Oh,
No, it's all right. I'll wait to the end.
Hold it.
We can come back. We can come back.
Save it.
Arthur's pass.
It is his side of the hill.
Leave the hills. Okay, goal 3, resilience. So again, building resilience in through new solutions. So some of the emulsions technologies. One of the things we are doing in here, and we probably won't get there today, but we've got kind of an approach to a 10-year implementation plan at a strategic level. And we do want to call out some of the bigger programs that help support those goals that we were talking about earlier on, and or big risks. So calling out Pages Road here in the context of managing risk around the Hikurangi subduction zone tsunami risk is the reason why we're calling out that particular project at a strategic level. And developing our transport network climate adaptation approach. There's a massive amount of work to do there. It'll partly be about through the adaptation planning, but it will be also about how we plan for the network as a whole. Right movement in the right places, 4th goal. Implement the One Network framework. I think we've given you a few presentations on the ONF, and that's getting the right movement in the right place, essentially. We tried to pull through the more economic productivity elements here, and I think the efficiency, adding efficiency into the mix here is a good place for it. So regional freight routes, working with our partners. We don't hold all the cards here, so I think it's acknowledging some of the spaces where we need to partner. The other thing we've called out here is urban freight movement on the local network. There's been quite a lot of change over the past, several years, where we do have a lot more goods and services being moved around on the local network. We don't have good information about that, and that's something that we think we need better information about, just to try and understand what's happening in the first instance. The congestion charging question. What we're saying is investigate the role of pricing tools to manage travel demand in the future. There's a whole bunch of stuff happening from a legislative perspective. We know that our population is going to grow. We need to understand what the appropriate use of those tools are in both a city and sub-regional perspective. So that's what we're saying there. Moving right along, choices. I think the one thing that I want to note about this one, just real quickly, is that this goal is quite a heavy lifter in terms of a number of the outcomes. from both a congestion management perspective, strategy perspective, from a climate change strategy perspective, from an inclusive access perspective. So significantly improving our public transport system is a priority here. Continuing to build a connected and safer walking, cycling and micromobility network, and supporting our residents and schools to try new ways of travelling. So the travel demand management aspect of here in here as well. This is another space where we're proposing that we call out a couple of big programs that have a network effect. So around the cycle network and PT Futures and the Mass Rapid Transit project. Almost there in terms of the goals. So we've put supporting equitable transition to zero emission vehicles in here as well. We don't hold all the cards here, obviously, but we can play a role in creating an enabling environment around charging infrastructure, and that's about where we want charging infrastructure to be and where we don't want charging infrastructure to be in terms of the road reserve, for example, or parts of the road reserve. I think we also wanted to acknowledge here that there'll be, in the same way that the point that we made earlier in the presentation, that we didn't know the extent to which micromobility would take off in 2012 when we put the plan in place. There's a lot of stuff we don't know about technologies, vehicle technologies, that are going to continue to transition over the next 30 years. So remaining open to that, I think, is a strategic kind of point that we want to make. And finally, with the goals, the vibrant and livable city. What we're proposing here is finish what we've started in the central city, complete the projects around the anchor project, the street projects around the anchor projects, and then review where we are as a next step. Plan for growth around core public transport corridors. So this is further transport planning along the MRT corridor. So it's about protecting the corridor, it's about planning around the centres on the corridor, and then finally, enhancing our streets and neighbourhoods as our city becomes more intensively developed, pulling through the urban forest plan directions, recognising that we're going to need more comprehensive curbside and parking management as we get more intensively developed in our neighbourhoods. That's starting to happen now. Got to get onto that one, and the whole kind of idea of walkable catchments. So what does a climate resilient neighbourhood look like? And we're proposing that we tackle that one through the local area planning program. Okay, I'm going to stop, take a breath. That is the goals, proposed goals.
Does it?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Tyler,
So-
did you had a question still from last time? And you haven't forgotten it? Okay.
It's a Jake's question.
And then there's Yanni.
So maybe you might want to hold on to that seasonal road use and get back to us on it.
Yeah, we're just
You're
gonna
cool
do
with
that.
that.
Yep.
But
Yeah, we've got that.
I've got a couple. Number one is the transport strategy, the goal 1, around well-managed transport assets.
Yep.
I'm wondering if you can add data diversification. Reason being is we take the data from incidences, right, and from movements through GPS, correct? There are some key transport intersections of which don't have any data on them, and therefore it's difficult to actually manage on where they are on the list. Am I correct? So it's around reporting. So I feel like there's a little bit of a hole there, and I don't know how we can sort of gain an understanding of those intersections that don't get reported on within the city route to be able to get the appropriate data to make those changes.
I suppose I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand what you're trying to
I'm wondering-
achieve. So we're trying to.
So you have number 1 here. So you have focus on whole of life costs and take a data driven approach to asset management.
Yep.
I feel like that doesn't go far enough, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yep.
I don't know what you can do to add to that. The second part is potentially adding the word agile and looking for solutions that are affordable. In some cases, agile. I'm not sure if agile is the word. It's sort of in line with Victoria's part on efficiency, but the key here is being reactive fast is actually being proactive. Do you guys understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Which means if you work fast on an issue, then you're actually being proactive on it.
Yes. It's very hard on the transport network to be proactive.
Yes. So that's why I added
Yes, I
agile, because you
understand
sort of
that.
can't write
Yeah.
proactive.
So I understand where you're
But
going. Yeah.
some form of agility somewhere in this would be really good, and it would sell really well to the community.
Yeah.
Because it's a goal to be agile whenever something pops up.
Yeah.
But those are the only two things.
Responsive.
I love that. That's great.
Okay.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yanni, please, Pauline, Sarah, and that's it. You had your go. Okay.
So I look at the plan for growth along core public transport corridors, and it says undertake further transport planning, and then I look at our 2006 strategy around the metro thing, and the goal was to complete investigations and cost and viability possible future mode and corridor options for Greater Christchurch, including but not limited to bus, rapid transit, light rail, heavy rail. And 2012, continue to protect appropriate corridors. The thing I'm struggling with is we keep hearing about doing more planning than actually doing the actual work. And I'm just wondering, like, at what point do we make a call, right, this is what we're doing? Particularly with things like light rail, mass rapid transit. It just seems like this thing that we've been planning for 20 years, but we actually haven't made any decisions about what we're going to do when. And I know funding's a big part of it, and I know we've had earthquakes, but you know, I go back to like that whole issue with public transport. We actually had a really good strategy. It pretty much says all the same things that we've said. Possibly we've lost a lot of things that we were going to do, but we're doing them in other ways. But we don't seem to ever get, here's what we said we're going to do, here's what we've achieved, here's what we haven't, here's how we can do what we're going to do, or here's what we're going to change.
That is what we're trying to do with this.
I think, Mike, do you want to go?
Just briefly, we have started action rather than plan. There has been a lot of planning, and Waka Kotahi have been doing work in the business case space. But through Plan Change 14, we sought a qualifying matter to have development setback to provide space for trees and amenity. I will say nothing more on Plan Change 14 for now, except that. But we are looking at options, including a designation, which we'll come back to give you more information on, which is actually an action from the last briefing before this.
I guess just a high-level concern with the transport strategy is, rather than just reinventing a new strategy for the sake of it, actually looking at the strategies that we currently, or the targets that we currently have, how we're progressing or not, and then tweaking what we need to change to get there, or actually just changing the targets because circumstances changed.
So it is actually, I'm going to speak for Jane in this respect. That is part of what Jane's tried to do in this regard, and the work that we've done on this is not to restart again from fresh. It is a refresh, a build up. The world has changed. This is what we've done. This is what we need to do moving forward. This is what you are telling us as council are your strategic goals. Very much agree with you, Councillor Johansson, about we need to be able to get on and do. That is part of this. This is part of the toolkit to be able to get on and do. We have got on and done a lot of stuff, and we should highlight that. But and part of it is to go back to what Councillor Henstock said earlier, is how do we depoliticise the decision making moving forward?
Yeah. Well, I would just add in terms of the goals.
Part of it is to give us last question.
Just in terms of the transport, I think we do need something that talks about doing a curb and channel. So investing in whatever it might be, but actually, there's nothing in here when you look at it. Even if it's vibrant and livable or well-managed assets, a commitment to fixing our roads and footpaths. And I think that needs to be really explicit. And again, I like the healthy streets, living streets kind of framework that we use, but I do think there needs to be something specific about fixing our broken infrastructure as a priority.
Okay. Sorry. Tyrone?
Okay. Just really quickly. So I know that this is all really, really high level. There's just a couple of things just bubbling away that is, can I have confidence that the strategy's going to address like the need to shift ever more volumes of freight out of the Port of Littleton through the city and to somewhere where it can be distributed? I mean, you don't need to answer that right now, but that's just kind of something that I'm always kind of thinking about, particularly if we're going to like allegedly grow the capacity of the port.
Yeah, that's there, right there, in goal 4.
Yeah, yeah, cool. And the other, I guess, the other one was, and you had the slide up conveniently of Dyers Pass Road in Tim's ward, but one that mainly affects residents in my ward rather than Tim's. So yes, absolutely resilient. Like, so I guess just. I mean, and as much as that we need to move people, freight out of the Port of Littleton, we also need to move people, and the work that ECAN have done has been phenomenal there. But there are also kind of like that is a real choke point on the transport network, and that, you know, for residents coming out of you know, Whakaroa, Littleton Harbour and through there. And I know it's not like a major piece, but it's just kind of just one of those network choke points that, you know, that I'm always mindful of, and I just hope that our strategy kind of like addresses that as well. Just the efficient movement of people across the hill as needed, and, you know, not blocking up all of Cashmere. You know, you don't pay like $3 million for a house to have cars sticking
Moving
outside
right
it the whole time.
So what you're saying is all the money we spent on that wasn't worthwhile, if it's still a choke point.
Oh, it's massive. On there, it's fantastic, very safe.
The other side you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The money spent on it was worthwhile from a safety perspective. Just, you know, it can only be 2 lanes, so we've got to do something different in terms of the volumes, the demand and supply balance.
Pauline said she had a small question.
You just on the goal 5 choices, you've got significantly improve our public transport system.
Yep.
But we do the infrastructure. So is that clear?
Part of the system.
It's part of a system, and I guess that's going back to that first slide around stewardship.
Yeah.
When we were talking about the need for the partnerships being a really important part of that stewardship. That's a really great example of where our partnership needs to be stronger.
I know, but we need to be clear all the way through that our role is infrastructure. Yep. In partnership with the system, maybe system/infrastructure. I don't know, but
yeah, that will come through in the actual text. But yeah, no, I take your point.
Thank you. And lastly, Sarah.
Kia ora. Mine's a little bit more of a comment as the portfolio lead that covers this. I just want to remind colleagues that this bit here is just the high level bit at the start. It's not all of the detail and the implementation and all of the bits and pieces. This is can we agree on the really high level, what we want to achieve, and then the next level we go down to how do we achieve it? Like, what are the detail underneath that? But it's really important that we can get agreement, not just around this table, but, you know, with the city on actually the direction of travel, which is the high level. So there is lots more underneath it, and while there's other words we might want in, a lot of that will come in underneath. You're just yet to see all of that, so... how big's the document now? Because it's shrunk since the last version, hasn't it?
It's shrunk. I haven't quite finished it.
Yeah.
Hoping that it won't be more than 30 pages at this stage.
So it was like 80 odd last time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's just really important that we remember that it's high level and that the detail, the implementation, all of that kind of stuff is the next levels down. So thank you.
Okay, and lastly, me, 2 things. You talk. I know it's getting down there a bit. We're talking about the buses damaging the road. Is that because they're all heavy? Because our buses didn't damage the road beforehand, but I'll just throw that out there. Now, how long between now and when you are finished and it's ready for us to vote on? Are you talking months, years, days, minutes?
That's
quite a long time, I imagine.
Oh no, we want to try and really put. We want to come back in October with a draft for consultation. So we want to move pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this work has been floating around for a long time, so there's actually quite a lot of content that's been developed. We just need to make what we wanted. The purpose of this one was just to kind of I guess, have a conversation at a reasonably high level about what the shape of the document and the approach that we're wanting to take with the content.
And just quicker than me, Vic.
So if we're looking at having this back to us in October.
Yep.
What does that mean then in terms of timeline for consultation? Does it mean that we're going to intersect with the Christmas period? Or
We'd like to get it before the Christmas period for consultation in November.
Okay.
3 or 4.
Three or four.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Have the rest of the day off.
Thank you.
Thanks. You get
Will
the
do.
rest of the day off? Are we done?
Thanks.
Righto. Thank you, mate. What have we got? The meeting tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes, got
Yep.
PC 14 tomorrow. I've got the
Really? Yeah, just be careful when you're chucking it out there. You don't want to inhale it. And, yeah, you've got to be a wee bit.
Maybe I'll get away.
I'd almost consider using a mask just because they're so ubiquitous these days.